Hey, game changers. What does it take for a boy with nothing to change the world? Have you ever looked in the mirror and asked yourself, is this it? Is this all I'm meant to be? That one question, it can light a fire. A fire strong enough to burn every excuse, every fear, every delay. Because deep down, you know it, something greater is calling you. Let's begin the story. Part 1. The Spark in the Dust. This story starts not in glory, but in dust. In the crumbling streets of a forgotten town, a young man named Rayan stood at a bus stop, carrying not luggage, but regret. 24 years old, jobless, lost, and invisible in a world that never slowed down. But what the world didn't see was the storm within him. A storm forged in silence, pain, and deep longing for more. Rayan was no stranger to disappointment. His life had become a blur of missed opportunities and silent heartbreaks. He had once dreamt of becoming a social innovator, someone who could transform slums into schools, trash into treasure, silence into voice. But life, as it often does, had knocked him off his path. His mother passed away when he was only 19. His father, a quiet man of principles, worked as a janitor in a public library and died the year after, leaving Rayan with nothing but a box of worn-out books and a rusted keychain with the word Rise. That day at the bus stop, Rayan was running from a job rejection, his third one that week. He had sold his last phone just to afford the bus fare to the interview. His stomach growled, his shoes were torn, and the sky above him looked as tired as his eyes. In frustration, he threw his backpack on the bench, and out of it fell a faded, cracked book, his father's favorite. Flipping it open with numb fingers, he saw the note. The ink was faded, but the words screamed louder than sirens. Don't wait for the world to change. Be the reason it does. It was in his father's handwriting. Those words hit like thunder. They weren't advice. They were a command, a challenge, a war cry, a full-on collision with his sleeping soul. And Rayan, still drenched in the dust of defeat, felt something stir inside him for the first time in years. It wasn't motivation. It was ignition. The greatest revolutions begin when one person decides they've had enough. He folded the note and tucked it close to his chest. It felt like armor. I will not live small anymore, he whispered to no one, but the wind carried it like a prophecy. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he couldn't stay where he was. And that's how change begins, not with answers, but with action, with one step, one decision, one refusal to quit. Rayan didn't take the bus that day. Instead, he walked, for hours, across town, across his fear. With every step, he whispered, I am not done. I am just beginning. People passed by, unaware that a quiet revolution was marching past them. He reached an abandoned lot, a place kids once played, but now drowned in weeds and garbage. He remembered how he and his friends used to race their bicycles here, how his father once said, where trash gathers, so can dreams, if someone's bold enough to clean it. With blistered hands, Rayan began picking up garbage. No camera, no help, no reason except one, because he could. It was a small act, but in that moment it was everything. His shoes soaked in mud, his shirt torn, but his heart, it had never beat louder. You don't wait for the light. You become the spark in the dark. Passers-by stared. Some laughed. One old man stopped and said, What are you doing, son? This won't change anything. Rayan smiled and replied, "It already has. Me." That night, he wrote on a scrap of paper, "I will clean this park, then build a bench, then plant a tree, then create a library. I may not change the world, but I will change this place. And maybe that's enough to start a fire." And so it began, one broken piece at a time. A forgotten boy in a forgotten town, igniting a future no one saw coming. You can't rewrite your past, but you can spark a future bold enough to burn through every excuse. Rayan didn't become a hero that night. He became something better, aware. Aware of his power. Aware that purpose doesn't come wrapped in perfection. It's built from brokenness, from dust, from defiance. The next morning, he showed up again, this time with a broom. The day after, a paintbrush. Then, a cardboard sign that read, "Let's fix this together." It wasn't long before a child joined him, then a mother, then a man with a wheelchair. A ripple had begun, but Rayan didn't smile for applause. He smiled because he knew this was just the beginning. You don't need to have it all to start. You just need to start. And he did, right there in the middle of the dust. Part 2, Storm Before the Sunrise. Change demands sacrifice, and Rayan felt it immediately like cold water splashed across his face every morning. He had taken the first bold step, but what he didn't realize was that the world would resist every inch of his rise. The friends he once laughed with now whispered behind his back. Some were crueler. "You? Be a leader? Please. You can't even lead your own life." One of them snorted while sipping tea, unaware of how deeply their words cut. Others mocked his late-night study sessions, his attempts to rebuild his life with knowledge. "You think some books will change your fate?" they jeered. But behind all the laughter was a hidden fear. Not fear of Rayan failing, but fear that he might actually succeed, because his rise would expose their comfort in stagnation. Sometimes your courage threatens people who've accepted mediocrity. Rise anyway. Rayan knew it wouldn't be easy, but he didn't expect the weight of rejection to come crashing down so hard. He failed interview after interview. Companies didn't even bother sending a rejection email. Some jobs wanted experience he didn't have. Others simply couldn't see beyond his patched shirt and quiet confidence. His savings evaporated. He began skipping meals, drinking water just to fill the hunger. He slept in parks some nights, covering himself with his old library books. Still, every night before he closed his eyes, he whispered, "I'm not going back." And every morning, he rose again. Not as a hero, as a fighter. Quiet, bruised, but unbroken. Fall 7 times. Rise 8. Because you don't stop when you're tired. You stop when you're done. He started taking free online courses, often begging cafes to let him charge his borrowed laptop. He volunteered for street cleanups, helped paint orphanage walls, distributed flyers for local events. Not for fame, not even for hope, but because doing something was better than drowning in nothing. One stormy evening, as Rayan walked home barefoot, his only pair of shoes now torn beyond repair, he passed a school. It was closed, its gates locked. But there, just outside, sat a boy, no older than 10, crying silently. Rayan crouched beside him. "What's wrong, champ?" The boy wiped his tears and mumbled, "I can't go to school. My mother can't buy books." Rayan's heart clenched. He saw himself in that child, eager to learn, but bound by chains poverty forged. That night, Rayan did something irrational but deeply human. He sold his shoes, the last decent thing he owned. and bought that boy a full set of school books. He even wrapped them in brown paper like his father used to. When he handed them over the next morning, the boy's smile outshone the sun. No words, just a tearful hug. Real change doesn't begin in the spotlight. It begins in silence, with a choice no one sees, but everyone feels. He didn't do it to feel noble. He did it because he knew. If he had the power to remove one child's obstacle, he couldn't ignore it. The word spread quietly, not through social media, but through whispers. The boy who gave his shoes for someone else's dream. But Rayan didn't bask in it. In fact, he avoided attention. His eyes were on a larger goal, to build a platform, someday, where people like him could stand tall without begging for the chance. Still, the road remained brutal. Rayan applied for an internship at a local NGO. He walked 6 miles to get there, only to be told, "Sorry, we only accept college graduates." He nodded, thanked them politely, and asked, "Can I still volunteer?" Surprised, they agreed. Weeks passed. He swept floors, arranged files, brought tea. But he also observed, listened, learned. He studied how projects were run, how people responded to vision, how paperwork became impact. His notes became strategies. His ideas became action plans. When you're not invited to the table, build your own, and invite others who never got the chance. Soon, he began helping with youth outreach. His natural empathy shone through. Kids opened up to him. Single mothers thanked him. The NGO's director noticed. "Who is this boy?" she asked. "The one who never complains, never stops." Rayan still slept in shelters, still skipped meals. But his vision was becoming clear. He didn't just want to change himself. He wanted to create ripples. Then came the real test. One of the outreach boys got caught stealing from a nearby shop. The NGO wanted to ban him permanently. Rayan stood up. "He's not a thief. He's a hungry child. Let me talk to him." He did. And within a week, the boy was helping Rayan in every campaign. Cleaning walls, distributing food, learning how to speak in public. The same boy who was nearly thrown away by society became a volunteer leader in 3 months. One act of belief can flip a life from surviving to thriving. Rayan's journey was still uphill, but now he had others walking with him. Not many, but enough. And he realized something powerful. Sacrifice hurts. But what hurts more is living without meaning. The world still judged him, but he no longer cared, because in a broken world, he was now a builder. One act, one choice, one day at a time. Storm still raged, but sunrise was coming. Part 3, Echoes of Fire. Months passed. Seasons changed. But one thing remained constant, Rayan's fire. It didn't roar loudly like a wildfire. It burned steady like a lantern in the dark, pulling others in who had long forgotten what warmth felt like. The small actions became waves. A child inspired by a clean park started organizing weekend garbage cleanups. A man who once mocked Rayan now ran a small reading club for street kids. The world hadn't changed, but people had begun to, one ripple at a time. Rayan understood something vital. People didn't follow perfection. They followed truth. And his truth was raw, scarred, and unapologetically real. He began telling his story not from stages, but from sidewalks. He shared it in street corners, local libraries, online forums, and late-night tea stalls. Not as a hero, not with drama, but as a reminder, you don't need permission to rise. If you have a voice, you have a weapon. Use it not to boast, but to build. Some listened. Some walked away. But the ones who stayed, those few were different. They weren't the loudest. They weren't the strongest. But they were hungry, not for fame, but for meaning. Rayan began gathering them, one by one. A girl who had been bullied all her life. A former addict who wanted to make amends. A refugee who dreamed of opening a community kitchen. Each one had a past. But more importantly, they had fire. They called themselves the Change Circle. It wasn't a fancy group. No t-shirts, no slogans, no social media filters. Just one unwritten rule. Do something every day that pushes the world forward. Help a stranger. Start a blog. Pick up trash. Speak up for someone. Write a letter of hope. Learn something. Teach something. Donate, even if all you had was time. They weren't waiting for someday. They were acting today. Hope doesn't knock. It waits behind the door of your first step. The movement spread like quiet wildfire. Not because it was promoted, but because it was felt. The Change Circle became a mirror to people who had forgotten how powerful they were. Soon, whispers turned to headlines. A local newspaper ran a story. The boy who cleans and teaches. A radio station interviewed him. National channels followed. They called him the Spark. Not because he shouted, but because he ignited. But fame, like fire, can be dangerous. Rayan noticed a shift. Some new members joined for clout. Others posted pictures just to go viral. The purity was at risk. And Rayan knew this wasn't why he started. So he addressed them all one day, standing on a worn-out wooden crate at the park where it all began. "No one here is a star," he said boldly. "We're not here to be seen. We're here to light stars in others. That's our mission. If you want selfies, fame, or spotlight, this isn't your place." Silence followed, but the real one stayed. You don't build movements with noise. You build them with values that echo long after the noise fades. Rayan continued his mission with humility. Even when invited to speak at conferences, he'd often refuse and instead request the money be used to fund food drives or buy school supplies. He turned down sponsorships, politely saying, "If money comes with conditions, I'll build with sweat." The Change Circle expanded. One group in Lahore started an urban garden. Another in Nairobi cleaned an entire alleyway and transformed it into a mural gallery. In Mumbai, members built a book-sharing library from old crates. A small team in Brazil began translating the Change Circle's values into their native language. This wasn't Rayan's movement anymore. It was humanity's. But in all this growth, Rayan kept himself grounded. Every morning, he still swept the same corner of the street he first cleaned. "Not because it needs me," he'd say, "but because I need to remember." One evening, a girl named Alina approached him after a talk. She was shy, shaking slightly. "I wanted to thank you," she whispered. 2 years ago, I was ready to end everything. Then I saw your video about giving your shoes to that boy. It reminded me that pain can have purpose." Rayan didn't know what to say. He simply hugged her. Tight. You'll never know the battles you've helped someone win, just by being brave enough to fight your own. That night, Rayan wrote in his notebook, "Echoes of fire. When your spark lights 1,000 flames you'll never see, but they burn on anyway." And that was the real miracle. The Change Circle wasn't about a man. It wasn't about fame. It was about the truth that ordinary people, when lit with belief, become unstoppable. So they kept pushing. kept rising, each one teaching another, each act becoming a ripple, each ripple a wave. And somewhere, in the quiet echoes of fire, the world began to feel it. The beginning of a revolution, not loud, not televised, but real. Great movements don't begin with millions. They begin with one who dares to believe the impossible is possible. Part 4. The Mountain We Climb. The change circle expanded across cities like wildfire. What began as a whisper had become a roar. But with growth came shadows. Where light shines, darkness tries to crawl in. What started as a pure flame of service and unity was now being watched, not only by those inspired, but by opportunists, people who smelled influence, not impact. The first signs were subtle. A newly joined member in another city started collecting donations under the Change Circle name without accountability. A volunteer from another region edited Rand's message, twisting it into slogans to promote a local political campaign. Messages flooded their inbox. You've lost control. It's just a trend now. Sell it before someone else does. Then came the trolls. Fake accounts, hate messages, videos mocking Rand's soft voice, his shoes, his past. What does a former street kid know about leading anything? One headline read. A popular influencer accused him of being a fraud who used people's pain to rise. Even some old members began doubting him. Some demanded leadership roles. Some wanted the group monetized. Others simply vanished. Growth is not just about numbers. It's about what you protect while everything tries to corrupt. Rayan watched everything unfold from a distance. He didn't respond with anger. But each day, the weight on his shoulders grew heavier. He was only one man, no PR team, no bodyguards, no legal counsel. Just one man who wanted to help others rise. One night, after a particularly harsh call where a former mentor told him, "Let it go, Rayan. This isn't your fight anymore," he found himself sitting alone on a rooftop, trembling. The stars above felt colder than usual. He opened his old notebook, the one that had witnessed his entire journey. As he flipped through the pages, small notes stared back. Start with the park, the boy's smile swept the street today, and finally, you were born to build, not to beg. He wanted to believe those words, but doubt is venomous. Was this a mistake? He whispered to himself. Maybe I should have stayed invisible. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I don't know if you'll read this, but I saw your interview a year ago. I was standing on the edge of a bridge that night, ready to jump. But your voice held me. I got help. I'm alive today. Thank you. Rayan froze. His heart clenched, not in pain, but in awakening. He remembered the boy at the school gate. He remembered the mother who cried when her daughter got her first job through Change Circle. He remembered the elderly man who told him, "You gave my grandson a reason to believe in kindness." True leaders don't rise because it's easy. They rise because silence is no longer an option. He wiped his tears and picked up a pen. In bold, unshaken handwriting, he wrote in his journal, "Every revolution bleeds before it breathes." Then he wrote another line. This mountain was never meant to be easy. It was meant to test if I'm willing to climb. And he was. The next day, Rayan called an emergency virtual assembly with leaders across regions. Hundreds showed up, some with loyalty, some with skepticism, some with nothing but questions. Rayan didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend himself. He simply shared the truth. This is not mine to own. It's ours to protect. If you're here for fame, leave. If you're here for control, take it elsewhere. But if you're here to serve, to build, to rise, to sacrifice, then let's climb this mountain together. Silence followed. Then slowly, people began turning their cameras on, nodding. One leader from Nepal raised his hand and said, "You brought me back from alcoholism. I'll fight for this." Another from South Africa added, "Let them laugh. We'll keep planting hope." A chain reaction began. Region after region, real leaders stood up, not self-proclaimed ones, but those whose hands were dirty with action. You don't lead by position. You lead by posture. Rayan created a new structure that day, one that decentralized power, a rotating leadership model, local councils for every city, a shadow accountability board made up of previous beneficiaries. No one person would carry the movement. It would carry itself. The trolls didn't stop. The offers didn't stop. But neither did the mission. Rayan went back to what mattered, visiting orphanages, building reading corners, mentoring new volunteers. He no longer tried to prove himself. He let his actions speak. One night, while walking back from a food drive, he passed a mural. It was new, painted by anonymous hands. It showed a boy holding a broom, handing a book to another child. Above them, it read, "The mountain we climb is ours to own." He smiled. That night, he didn't feel alone. Every mountain tests your breath, but the climb teaches you who you truly are. He was no longer just a spark. He was a flame held by thousands. And he knew, storms may come, but those who climb with purpose don't fear the wind. They welcome it. Part 5. Be the change. Today, tomorrow, forever. 10 years have passed. The change circle has become more than a movement. It's now a global rhythm pulsing through streets, schools, slums, and skyscrapers alike. Millions have joined, from the deserts of Sudan to the villages of Vietnam, from graffiti-covered alleys in New York to sun-baked rooftops in Karachi. The mission lives and breathes. But Rayan? Rayan hasn't changed at his core. He still begins every day the same way. Not with a press conference, not with a headline, but with a broom in his hand, sweeping the street outside his home, the same corner where it all started. Why? Because for Rayan, change isn't an event. It isn't a launch or a tweet or a TED Talk. It's a habit, a mindset, a muscle you train daily, not to impress, but to stay alive. True change doesn't shout, it whispers in your habits. He spends his mornings writing handwritten notes of hope, slips them into books at public libraries, tapes them on park benches, leaves them at bus stops. Notes that say, "You matter, this pain will pass, the world still needs your fire." He makes random calls to struggling students he once mentored. Some don't pick up, some break down in tears, but all of them feel something rare. Someone still cares. The world now calls him an icon. Awards, interviews, books, even a documentary. But Rayan? He never posts about it, because he remembers the voice that almost stopped him, the one that whispered, "Not today. You're not enough. Why even try?" The greatest battle is never against the world. It's against the whisper that says you can't. That whisper still visits him, especially on days when he feels alone, when storms of doubt return. But Rayan has learned how to answer it. He simply acts. He still walks into forgotten neighborhoods, sits on curbs with boys who remind him of his younger self. He listens. He doesn't try to fix them. He offers presence. the kind he once craved when the world passed him by. He helped build over 600 reading corners globally, over 10,000 community kitchens, funded schools, trained counselors, empowered single mothers to launch their businesses, planted trees where there was once trash. But more than anything, Rayan helped awaken belief. In one-on-one conversations, in dark alleys, in cold shelters. Being the change doesn't always mean changing the world. Sometimes it means showing someone that their world still has light. One day, a young girl in Manila sent him a video. She had built a hope booth using cardboard and colored markers where strangers could leave or take messages of encouragement. She said, "I saw what you did, and now I do it too." Another message came from an elderly man in Morocco. "I joined the Change Circle last year. I'm 76. I thought I was too late. But now, I teach neighborhood kids how to read. Thank you for showing me that change doesn't have an expiry date." Rayan watched these messages not with pride, but with reverence. Because he knows this was never about him. It was always about you. Yes, you, reading this, watching this, sitting quietly but feeling the fire rising in your chest. You who's scared, who's tired, who wonders if you matter. You do. Be the change isn't a slogan. It's a way of life. Rayan had nothing, no money, no support, no blueprint. But he had one thing the world couldn't take from him: a decision. He decided to rise. And now, it's your turn. Don't wait. Don't wait for the perfect plan. Don't wait for the right mood. Don't wait for applause, permission, or safety. Just start. Help someone. Teach something. Clean anything. Listen deeply. Speak boldly. Donate a book. Share your story. Refuse to stay silent. You don't need to be extraordinary to make a difference. You just need to be willing. And when it gets hard, and it will, remember Rayan. Remember that he had no cape, no spotlight, just scars and a stubborn heart. He faced mockery, betrayal, and exhaustion. But he kept going, because deep down he knew you can't conquer tomorrow unless you choose to start today. So rise. Be the spark someone needs. Be the voice you never heard. Be the hope that heals. Be the fire that refuses to fade. Be the change. Start today. Conquer tomorrow. Forever. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.